about our love for the digital world. We talked about the complicated relationship we currently have with cybercrime and cybersecurity. And Bibi also showed how this eventually can be viewed also as a love relationship. We talked about the current bad marriage we have with the dependency on some very big hyperscalers. And we discussed that from the perspective of academia, who can provide us insights on how to innovate our way out of it, how to build an alternative for the digital world. And we discussed this current relationship with government, who can push us towards a more autonomous and cyber-secure future in 2035. And after the break, we're going to analyze a third part of this triple helix. We're going to think about how to innovate our way out of it, how to keep those innovations in Europe, in the Netherlands. But first, I would like to ask you, on the perspective of government and academia you just had, did you have some insights you just discussed during the break you would like to share with the audience? Daan Hogendijk, over there. What was your insight?
Yeah, we just talked about it. I'm the director of Samen Digital Veilig. It's a Dutch platform from VNO-NCW and MKB Netherlands for, well, we have over 100 associations, and we work to, activate small and medium companies in the Netherlands and also in Europe. And we're very awake at the moment. Yeah. Our insight is that, this is a time of the Great Awakening. I was very impressed with the Bibi presentation. She said, we didn't have Pearl Harbor, but we have all this data, and all this time it didn't happen, and it looked like we were sleeping. Mm-hmm. So I think that for the last 20 years, maybe we've been sleeping. Now geopolitical stuff happens, and all of a sudden we talk about digital sovereignty, we talk about collaboration, we talk about innovation, and there's a lot of good stuff happening the last few years.
We didn't have that 5 years ago. I remember I was working on a report as an advisor for the Dutch Cyber Security Council. Bibi was in it. Maybe you remember that, Bibi. It was a report on digital autonomy. Yep. And it was written by Paul Timmers and Lokke Moreau. And I helped them giving feedback on that report. And after that, my eyes opened, basically, because that was the first time I was made aware of this dependency 5 years ago. I remember it was a COVID time and my son was born, so I remember it. But then, Bibi, maybe you can say something about that, because then we went to the government, we went to the Ministry of Economic Affairs. We thought, okay, probably their eyes will be open now as well. And what happened? Well, okay, sorry.
What happened was they said it's all very complicated. Let's just stick with Microsoft is what happened, right?
Yeah, nothing happened.
No.
And this is actually, if you read that report, you should look it up, Cybersecurity Raad, and then look up the report, Digital Autonomy. Well, I don't know the exact name, but it had something to do with digital autonomy and all kinds of direction, what we're talking about right now. And actually, if you look at that report, I think 98% of the discussion we have today is already in it. But then the timing, it just fell completely dead.
Yeah. There's a lot of examples that prove that we are waking up. Last year we had a ABN Amro webinar. I was one of the speakers. And we had over 1,000 applications where we expected a few hundred, right? You see the development of the CRA. which will wake up
Cyber Resilience
thousands of companies.
Yeah.
We have the NIS2 that's coming, which has a provision that large companies must talk to their suppliers, which will activate 100,000 companies. We have the implementation of the NIS2 supply chain certification. We have lots and lots of innovations and Dutch companies that are working on new office products. People are scared of it, but it is happening all around us. So I'm very positive. We were sleeping, now we're awaking, and what do awake people do? We make plans and then we execute. So
we have breakfast. Yes. So another reflection. You can pass on the microphone.
You're right, we are awakening, but Alexander Scholtes mentioned that it will take 9 years to become independent from the big tech. 2035. So I'm not that positive, to be honest.
9 years. Some other reflections on this topic? I see somebody up there. Olaf.
Ja, ik ga rennen.
Olaf is running.
Hop, hop, hop.
You trained for this, Olaf.
Hi. One interesting discussion I had as well during the break is we heard positive insights from the governments, local and national, but one thing that I think is missing is the collaboration between the private and the public sectors. I don't think the government alone should be looking at this. There's a lot of expertise and knowledge within the private sector, and how is this going to look like in the future, right? It doesn't. I don't think the difference will be if just the governments move over and fix their supply chain issues. I think there has to be discussions with the private sector as well at some level.
There needs to be cooperation. One last reflection. I see two.
Yeah.
Yes, you're first over there.
Hi, I have one question. You said 5 years ago approximately there was already a report and you were discussing exactly the same as we are discussing like today,
yes.
right? What makes you think, or Bibi think, or others think that we're actually going to change something now instead of having another president in 3 years in America, which is going to be a friendly president and everything is okay again and we fall asleep again? Did we reach a point of no return? Or is it actually still possible that we do return, fall asleep and stay whatever is like 5 years ago?
Shall we ask that to the person who said it was very hard to predict the future? That would be nice, right? Well, personally, I think this is a real risk. Well, maybe do you want to reflect on that, or?
Ja of nee?
I think it's a risk, and I can tell you that what we're currently seeing is also a very big lobby maneuver of these American hyperscalers. For example, promoting sovereign big tech in Europe as a sort of step between fully autonomous and the current situation, with the aim, at least that's my opinion, I'm not saying this as a host and moderator, but just as my opinion, that we will just stick to an autonomous Amazon cloud in Europe. And then maybe in 3 years, the urgency is a little bit less. So this is also the big question. Should we do like Schleswig-Holstein, the German Bundesrepublik, the German province, basically, which is with a big bang migrated to an autonomous cloud? Or should we do it step by step with the risk that we take one little step, maybe asking Amazon or Microsoft for some extra safeguards, and then stop taking these steps? So I think it's very important to also raise this, because now it's easy to say 2035 we need to be autonomous. Yes, we're all rallying behind that point, but for example, we don't see any budget in the current coalition agreement on digital autonomy. And we know that the first step will cost us some money to migrate away from the hyperscalers. Maybe on the long term it will save us money, and this money will stay into the European ecosystem. That's all valid arguments. But on the short term it will cost us money, and if there's no budget, if there are a lot of civil servants, a lot of budget cuts on the Rijks level, yeah, then I think, okay, is the money really where the mouth is? So I think we all, if we feel that this is an issue, and I think we all feel that, we have also the responsibility to watch this proceeding. Kees.
Thank you.
Oh, Bibi, you want to say? Oh, yeah. I thought you didn't want to do the prediction. Okay, I'll come back to Bibi. Sorry.
I missed two aspects actually in the whole discussion, and that is open standards, and if you do a tender, exit strategies. Do from day one, when you enter any cloud or any office environment or whatever you want to go into, from day one, plan for exit with open standards on data formats and protocols.
Okay. Then we move to Bibi. Sorry, Bibi. You agreed with that. Okay, sorry. Okay. Well, that's very important because also with DigiD and Solvinity, and also with Ziffer, which was also being acquired, not a lot of municipalities said, okay, this is a problem. There was no alarm going off when a company was sold to another to an American company. Okay, let's continue. Because, as said, I got this very sad message that Daniel Gebler, the co-founder of Picnic, which is arguably one of the most disruptive companies in the Netherlands and in Europe, was ill. So he couldn't talk about how to foster innovation, how to be so innovative in these times of cybersecurity and digital autonomy. But he was willing to have a short conversation with me this morning, although he was ill, and we agreed that we would organize a webinar where I would interview him and he could do his talk and you can ask the questions, but in a later stage. So if you go to the QR code, you can register for the webinar. It's and you can attend it. If you can't attend it, you can also register and you get the on-demand video. So in this way, we can also hear, we can still hear Daniel's voice, and we wish him all the best, obviously. I still see some people with the phones scanning the QR. We sent the presentation afterwards to everybody, so if you want, you can then scan the QR code and see the interview with Daniel. And some other webinars are on there as well. You can choose whatever you want. So, our next speaker, a very special guest for tonight, because Melanie Riebach is the co-founder of Radically Open Security and is an advocate for European autonomous alternatives. Has been an advocate for a long time. She's also a member of the advisory board Digital Resilience of VNO-NCW. So give her a warm round of applause. Melanie Riebach. Melanie, thank you for that you were able to come.
Yes, of course.
What are you going to talk about?
So I'm going to talk about digital sovereignty and open source, and also steward ownership.
Oh, very curious. And why do you want to talk about that?
Why do I want to talk about it? Because you know, I've been in business now with Radically Open Security for 12 years. Time flies. And I believe that Radically Open Security is the only Dutch cybersecurity company of our size and our age that has not been sold.
Yet, somebody said, but now...
No, that's a good comment. See, the thing is, we're set up with something called a steward ownership structure. We're foundation owned. There's also golden shares, basically, to prevent eventual sale of the company. I've had really awkward conversations with parties from Silicon Valley, who I will not name, who said to me, you know, Radically Open Security would be an amazing acquisition target. But then you told us about your governance structure, and never mind. So.
I'm curious.
So, yeah.
So tell us more about that.
Absolutely. So look, there is a lot of really great energy and intellect and money in the Netherlands and in Europe for cybersecurity. There's countless startups, you know, who become scale-ups who have also spun off from academic research projects. You know, a lot of this is subsidized by the NVO, by the STV, by, you know, other funding agencies. But we just have one critical problem. Just one by one, they keep getting acquired. And, you know, it's not just, well, you know, even with Solvinity, of course, and with this situation now with Kyndryl, it's actually the second time that Solvinity had a merger and acquisition event. Of course, you know, it started out as a merger between BitBrains and ASP for All. I'm actually quite friendly with Mike Vesseling, who was one of the original co-founders of BitBrains at the time. He is awesome. Like he goes to hacker events and builds these big things with flamethrowers. So, and I think, you know, from speaking to him, I can't speak for him right now, but I know that he had a few questions in his head after the sale, basically after the merger of his company. And I can imagine now, again, I can't speak for him, but I'd be really curious to hear his opinion about the role, basically, that his company, that he started, that he now has completely no control over anymore, the dialogue, the discourse, also in our parliament, that this is leading to, and having, unfortunately and completely inadvertently, been a part of this. You know, it's the same thing if you consider also some other really great old school Dutch cybersecurity companies. You know, remember Madison Gurka? Right? You know, Walter Belgers, you know, and that, he's awesome too, by the way. You know, super knowledgeable guy, very open source-ish, you know, really good guy. But of course, that wound up getting sold to Secura, and then that wound up getting sold again to Bureau Veritas. And I also read, I think somewhere online, that Bureau Veritas has had over 40 mergers and acquisitions in the last decade. So, interesting. We've also got Fox IT, right? You know, another great Dutch cybersecurity company who got acquired by NCC Group, then had a whole bunch of conflicts and internal struggles, you know, with NCC. Then some of the directors I left, maybe not voluntarily. You know, then you had the whole thing with Fox Crypto, you know, which was also supposed to be locked down, but then somehow wound up getting sold to, what was it, the CN Group? They're making data diodes for our government, right? You know, so we've just got this chronic problem. And if it's not that, you know, I mean, Booking.com, I think now is owned by, what was it, the Americans? Shell is now British. ASML is outsourcing a bunch of the operations to China. And yeah, what's left? Oh yeah, KPN also merged with, I'm sorry, KLM also merged with Air France, so there you go. So, you know, we've got this chronic problem, you know, that we keep starting these things and then one by one, you know, they get external investment and then eventually get sold. You know, and we celebrate this as success. You know, if you're a startup founder, you know, I can remember when I was first starting Radically Open Security, I went to the Amsterdam Center for Entrepreneurship, which unfortunately doesn't exist anymore. But you know, I got incubation and, you know, we learned on day one in our startup boot camp, we got the PowerPoint slide with the exponential curve on it, and they said, do this. And by the way, your definition of success is to sell the company. And, you know, I was coming into this as a techie, you know, with a hacking background, and I was just like, this makes no sense to me. Of course, after 4 years of being a tech CEO, I started realizing, wait a minute, this does make sense, but not for me. You know, and by that definition also, then with Radically Open Security being the only Dutch cybersecurity company of our size and our age that hasn't been acquired, that by definition makes me the least successful cybersecurity entrepreneur in the Netherlands. Fantastic. So, right. But look, we need to really take some serious looks at our infrastructure that we have here, because this is by design. It is not an accident that our companies are getting sold one by one. This is precisely how things are architected. If you consider cybersecurity incubators like the Hague Security Delta, fantastic, right? And it can take a lot of our wonderful Dutch and European-funded academic innovations, help to valorize them, put them into real companies, get venture capital involved. Wait, I think Ziver was with them, right? So look, but this keeps happening again and again. So maybe we need to start actually questioning the story that we have about our definition of success, but then also we need to question the governance structures that we're using for these great European innovations. We need to think first, I think, about open source. Because as we know, open source underlies everything. All proprietary software is built upon open source. All of our client devices are built ultimately on open source. Our entire internet is built on open source. And yet, somehow we're losing control over all of this. So what's the problem here? I've been in cybersecurity for 25 years now. I've got some gray hairs. And I can remember the days that Metasploit was completely free, that Nessus was completely free, that Snort was completely free. And slowly what happened was that investors got involved, and then very slowly they went in the direction of freemium. So, it starts really slowly with freemium. It usually starts with, features that they figure are kind of enterprise features like single sign-on, right? And it starts disappearing behind the enterprise paywall. Of course, at the beginning, the enterprise licenses are cheap, so people don't really think too much about it. And eventually, over time, what winds up happening is they start developing incrementally more and more of the code base under that incrementally under that enterprise license. The next thing that they start limiting is maybe the number of users, the number of seats that you have in the software. It starts with a very low number, and eventually, over time, the cost starts rising, the number of seats start lowering. I had this situation with Rocket Chat, which is basically an open source, self-hosted Slack clone that I've used for, probably over a decade now with radically open security. It's actually at the very heart of our pen testing process. And, what wound up happening was when we first started using Rocket Chat, it was completely free and open source. Then a venture capitalist got involved. Then, of course, as previously described, the enterprise paywall came in. It turns out with radically open security, we at a certain point had reported enough 0 days to them that they liked us. And as a favor, they basically started giving us a free enterprise license because they wanted to keep us in their ecosystem so we could continue reporting 0 days for free, of course. And, everything was well and good, but then, over time, of course, they were becoming more and more commercial. I think nowadays, if you look, I think it's like they're billing themselves as the Secure Comms OS, and there's like a picture of a soldier holding like some gun, like on their website. And, so, obviously the corporate culture has shifted somewhat, let's say, from the time that it started. And at a certain point, like every single year, we needed to get our free license extended. Of course, me being like utterly naive, I didn't get it in writing. So I was basically talking to them about getting an extension of this license, they started kind of waiting until the very last minute, to extend the license for us, but they did. And, this, I think back in December, actually, our license was just about to expire again. I'd been mailing them for months. We were basically being ghosted. And eventually, in the very last, 2 days before our license expired, I had my guys migrating our entire infrastructure in an emergency over the weekend to Zulip, which, mind you, Zulip is also cool, but it would have been disruptive because, of course, not everything works during emergency migrations, the first time necessarily. So it was a big risk for us. And then what wound up happening was, and the problem was that at this point, we actually calculated how much it was going to cost us if we wanted to buy the enterprise license. And at this point, given the number of users we have in our Rocket Chat, it would have cost us 70,000 euros a year. And for a medium-sized enterprise, we're 60 people these days at Radically Open Security. We're not small, we're not big, we're just, somewhere in the middle. But I can tell you that, 70K is a lot of money, for us. And it was just like, for that amount of money, I can just pay my people to, to migrate, and we can maintain something else. Finally, in the 11th hour, one of my hackers reported yet another 0 day, and then they stopped ghosting us, and then they gave us another license extension. But look, the point is, this affects business continuity, at a certain point. So, trying to actually keep our open source projects open source is a non-trivial issue. But the other problem that we have with open source is that frequently it is funded also by really wonderful organizations, NLNet, SCDN funds, also other funding agencies, which is great. A lot of love for them, and actually I donate 90% of my profits at Radically Open Security to NLNet. We've given them 1.2 million euros since I started the company. But the problem, though, is that most of these open source project founders, they're not really business-minded. And what winds up happening is when the subsidy starts running out, then they panic. But by that time, it's kind of too late to create a business model. They've already created this thing, and it's really hard at that point to change it into something else. And they ask, of course, at that point, the question, gee, I wonder if someone's going to buy it. And then they hear crickets. And this is why a lot of these really great, funded open source projects just wind up folding and disappearing. But then what's the alternative? So the alternative then is to, accept venture capital. Because the problem is that with things like the NGI Zero initiative, Next Generation Internet, which is the largest funding program, not just in Europe, but in the world, there's been a couple $100 million in EC funding, and they funded actually over 1,000 amazing open source projects. This is great. But then also there is some valorization and sort of TTO services that are provided, but the problem though is, again, Silicon Valley model, capital scale exit, it keeps getting venture capitalists involved, and then that whole circus, every single time keeps playing out, right? And the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and over and expecting a different outcome. So, okay, we're kind of starting to understand what the problem is, but okay, give me a solution, right? Because, if it were so easy to fix, wouldn't we have fixed it right now? Well, let's start by looking at my company. We haven't gotten sold. And I told you about that previous awkward conversation with the Silicon Valley party that wanted to acquire me. My hands are tied, because the thing is, with steward ownership, particularly the strong kind with asset locks and golden shares, it's like a Ulysses pact. I am bound to the mast of my company. And I did so 12 years ago so I could sail through the siren straits of money and be able to hear the song and never untie myself. And today I am living with the consequences of this. I am not a high net worth individual, even though I very much could have been. But I have something else in return that you can't pay for. And that's integrity and also influence to get people to make similar decisions, right? For positive impact and to try and make the ecosystem better. So, after 4 or 5 years of running Radically Open Security, we were turning into a good, stable business. We started winning awards. We were donating to NLNet. I got some awards like, most innovative IT leader of the Netherlands from CIO magazine, and one of the 9 most innovative women in the EU from, I'm not even European, by the way. But look, the point was that other entrepreneurs started coming up to me saying, hey, Melanie, great startup you've got there. Could you help me to start something similar, but then in other areas? And that's when I created Nonprofit Ventures. So Nonprofit Ventures is a startup incubator that teaches steward ownership and new economic thinking. And you would wonder how many entrepreneurs are actually crazy enough to do the same kinds of things that I'm doing. Turns out, a fair number. We've incubated, so far, roughly 80 startups across 6 cohorts. Another thing is I developed a class that's called Post-Growth Entrepreneurship at the University of Amsterdam Business School. I just finished teaching it for the 4th year to 180 third-year bachelor students. It's part of the Economics and Sustainability minor, and it's worth 6 European credit points. That class, since then, has spread also to the Autonomous University of Barcelona. And in 2004, I actually went on a so-called travel sabbatical. I put up a message on LinkedIn saying, does anybody want me to give a presentation? If so, send me a LinkedIn message. I got about 30 messages, and I wound up giving 64 presentations across 4 continents in 1 year. Basically evangelizing steward ownership and new economic thought. And we're getting a lot of other inquiries now from other business schools and incubators that want to promote the same kind of thinking. So things are moving, right? There's also the steward ownership movement, Any of you who are not familiar with the Purpose Foundation, there's now thousands of businesses just like mine globally. And there's also a legacy, particularly in Scandinavia and in Denmark. And this includes some of the largest companies that we have in Europe. Novo Nordisk is foundation-owned. And it's also the most valuable company in Europe. So, I think if it's good enough for the Danish, we can at least consider it. But the point, though, is that not everybody wants this to happen. So, I've been busy also with political lobby. These are all like things that I never thought I was going to get involved with. But, I was actually one of the 2 co-initiators of an initiative called the Rentmeester-Vennootschap. Now, I'm not sure if you've heard of it, but the Rentmeester-Vennootschap is a proposal for a steward ownership legal form. We put up a petition a few years ago. It got picked up by D66. It got co-sponsored by NSC. A month later, it went up for a vote in the Tweede Kamer, and it passed. And I'm also happy to say that a week ago, the Rentmeester-Vennootschap just made it into the new coalition accord. Thank you. Things are moving. And it's not just us, it's also Germany. In Germany, they also have gotten it not once, but twice. They've got basically what's called the GmbH with tied assets. But the problem, though, is these things tend to get stuck in our economics ministries. In Germany, they've had this problem. Also here in the Netherlands, we've had the same problem. And the problem is we've had some lawyerish types who basically have said, and I'm going to say this in Dutch just for full effect, het is een vervuiling van de wetboek. I'm not going to try to translate. And they also said, we zien de nut en de noodzaak daar niet van. Yeah, so we don't see the use or the utility for any of this. I kind of wonder the degree to which it's politics. It just so happened also that the previous Minister of Economic Affairs was from the PVV. And our new Minister of Economic Affairs is from the CDA. So I'm a bit more optimistic now, because stewardship is deeply Christian, by the way. Anyhow, but that being said, it's not just at these individual member state levels that this stuff is moving, but it's also moving on a European level. So I don't know how many of you are familiar with the 28th regime. Crickets. Okay, one hand over there. All right, let me explain. So the 28th regime is basically a pan-European startup and scale-up legal forum that's meant, first of all, to facilitate, of course, easy movement of European startups and scale-ups across borders of the 27 EU member states. That's why it's called the 28th regime. It's basically spanning across all of them. But the rapporteur who basically picked up the 28th regime, his name is René Rapassi. He is a Dutch MEP. He lives in Rotterdam. And he just so happens to have written both steward ownership as well as employee ownership into the proposal. So, the only problem, of course, is that René is a socialist politician. So, of course, then the immediate concern was, oh no, the conservatives are going to shoot it down, given given the direction of politics these days. So I actually just personally spent the last 5 months, 6 months lobbying together with UniaPAC, which is basically the largest political action committee of Christian business entrepreneurs in Europe. And we've been basically talking to all of the EPP and ECR politicians saying, no, but stewardship is deeply Christian. It's not woke. Don't kill it. And about 2 weeks ago, well, actually, previous to that, there was a vote in the jury committee where we got a considerable majority in the European Parliament. And the European Parliament had a plenary vote on this 3 weeks ago, and we had roughly 500 for, 150 against, and 25 abstentions. And majorities like that don't happen in politics nowadays. So, really the only people who voted against it were the fringe extreme left and extreme right. Both. Pardon me if you belong to them, but everybody else basically pulled together to make this happen. So the only problem is that at this point, there's an initiative from Silicon Valley-oriented venture capitalists that are trying to maybe make some changes. There's a lot of VCs that make a lot of noise, and also their ecosystem partners who, make a lot of noise on LinkedIn, also on a lobby basis. And they are saying things like, first of all, we don't need steward ownership and these other optional bells and whistles in the 28th regime because we want to keep it simple and we want to give entrepreneurs what they want. Right? And the other thing that is happening right now is there's a large group of people that are saying, we want the 28th regime to be implemented as a regulation and not as a harmonizing directive. Now, you guys are not going to understand what this means, so let me explain it to you. A regulation basically means that it will be centralized in Brussels, whereas a harmonizing directive means that every single EU member state has autonomy to be able to implement it in accordance with their own local rules. Now, quite frankly, the conservative politicians, are probably not going to go for this regulation. It will take the autonomy away from the EU member states. They are deeply suspicious of anything that is centralized in Brussels. It will kill subsidiarity. And basically, it's going to be the death blow to the 28th regime. But these venture capitalists are still shouting, we don't want a second best solution. Right? We want something that, and the problem is this kind of like no compromise, move fast and break things approach is going to leave us with nothing. But maybe, maybe some of these these US-based venture capitalists, or even these European-based VCs with more than 50% US-based LPs on their cap table, maybe actually that this is what they want. Because everything that makes it more attractive and easier for European entrepreneurs to start and keep their businesses in the European Union, well, that's not in their best interest now, is it? Being able to easily implement steward ownership as an entrepreneur without huge legal costs, without having the complexity of needing to hire in notaries and lawyers to create bespoke plans for us, this will make all the difference, because a lot of entrepreneurs at the beginning don't have money. They say, this is too complicated, too expensive, I'll do it later. But the problem is later, once they actually have a cash flow going, then they're going to start getting euro signs in their eyes, and they're going to say, you know what, I think that steward ownership wasn't such a good idea after all. So, this legal form really will be a game changer. It is really, from a systems thinking approach, tackling a root cause on a governance level, that really will, and it's not that we want preferential treatment as entrepreneurs, we just want options. So look, the whole point here is I want you guys to understand that there is a battle right now that is going on over corporate governance. And this corporate governance has everything to do with protecting open source and keeping it open. This governance has everything to do with European digital sovereignty. It has everything to do with creating European tech companies and making sure that they stay European in the long term. So what do I need from you guys? Well, first, just be aware, educate yourselves about these governance structures, and talk about it, because we need more people from the tech communities, also from the business communities, that are willing to stand up and support these kinds of things. We also need alternative forms of venture capital. I'm also busy starting a steward ownership venture capital fund at the moment called Non-Extractive Capital. Which is steward-owned itself. We're reforming the fee structures to eliminate the carried interest, and we are starting our first fund that is called the Digital Sovereignty Fund, where we will be funding fully steward-owned open-source tech companies to help build a sovereign tech ecosystem for Europe.
Thank you.
So we are going to be creating a cohort of European tech companies that are born in Europe, stay in Europe, and that will never be acquired by Google or Elon Musk or any of the others.
Nice. Thank you, Melanie, for this amazing story. I was wondering, are there any questions in the audience for Melanie currently? I see a question up there. I see a question up there. We have still room for some questions. Maybe first over there.
Oh, he's got
first
a
over
mic
there.
already.
Yeah, you already got it.
So open source is now a new battlefield where many actors are trying to change the design and the implementation of software to do whatever they want. Whenever you're scared when your open source project will be acquired, why don't you build in very deeply logic bombs that go off as soon as someone buys your open source project, and then nothing works anymore, but you only let it detonate, like 30 years later?
I don't even think you need to build in the logic bombs, because once the party that acquires you forces you to start using Windows, everything's going to blow up anyway.
Okay, next question. We have a question up there. We're going to do that.
So it's funny that you say that open source underlies everything, but we're in a bank, and you could argue that money underlies everything. And in a way, right, in a way, your idea isn't even that new, because not this bank, but a different bank was started also not so much Christian, but as a cooperative bank by farmers who needed financing, right? And the weird thing in Europe right now is that we have lots of money, lots of pension funds, who all invest in American big tech, who all buy up these startups and scale-ups. And the reason is very simple. We don't have a single European market, right? The moment you grow to a certain level, right, you need investment, and you go to the Anglo-Saxons. Now, your 28th regime is, and that's why I want to make it a little bit broader, right, so that don't people think, oh, this is just a woke thing. This is one of the few initiatives to actually create a European ecosystem for business, right, to actually create companies. So it's not just about this specific form of governments. It's one of the...
What's your question?
So my first question is so two questions is, do you see this in a wider initiative of basically growing our own stuff, right? Being able to actually grow our own industries, or not? Or do you see it much more as in growing open source?
Yes, of course. I mean, 28th regime is much broader. I mean, it was started, in response to the, Ursula von der Leyen had called for it in response to the Mario Draghi report that was saying that we needed a more resilient and competitive economy. And absolutely, I mean, really the 28th regime is about cross-border startups and scale-ups. That's the whole point. And as I said, steward ownership and employee ownership are just optional add-ons. Nobody's forced to use that. It will make it easier for entrepreneurs for that particular thing, but in general, it will make it more attractive to have our companies start here and stay here. But this is precisely why I'm saying with the things like the We Want a Regulation campaign that's happening at the moment, I mean, that is not meant to necessarily shoot down steward ownership, it's meant to shoot down the 28th regime. Because the 28th regime as a whole will increase our ability here in Europe to be able to be more economically resilient and have this single market. And again, the US, I think, doesn't perceive this as being in their best interest. So basically, I think that, we just need to make sure that the 28th regime, however it's implemented, that it actually gets implemented. And the main thing is a regulation would be fantastic if it could survive the political process, but I don't think that it will. Instead, really what we just need to do is say we want the 28th regime regardless of how it's implemented, right? And really just be realistic about how it's going to actually survive the political process and how not.
So just to say how cool it is what you're doing, what most people may not know, you see 70,000 is a lot of money. Mm-hmm. Big tech spends 150 million in 2025 on lobbying in Brussels alone. They have one event for MEPs every day, 3 or 4 like this.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of noise being made, and there's a very good economic reason for
Sure.
it. The cloud market is worth, I don't know how much.
Yeah.
Right?
But look, absolutely. Look,
so for those of you who didn't understand,
yeah.
if you didn't hear the question, it goes about lobbying power, 150 million for big tech.
Yeah.
Really, can you answer that shortly, because we have some other questions?
Let me just respond to him real quick.
Yeah, so good.
So I agree with you. My own story is basically on a meso level, not on a macro level. Of course, there's larger companies that are paying ridiculous amounts of money. I don't have that kind of revenue in my company, so obviously it's not on that scale. But at the same time, remember, there's more companies like me than there are companies like ABN Amro. And SMEs are actually 90% of the businesses in our economy. We're the scaffolding that is actually holding society together. So that 70,000 euro license for a company like mine, or a company like 99% of the businesses that are out there that are relying maybe on freemium, these days they call it open core, by the way, but open core basically means free in the middle, and then just junk on the outside, basically. But the point is that the majority of companies actually are also going to be facing a struggle like mine. But I agree with you that on a macro level, it's mind-boggling. Yeah.
Melanie, we have room for 2 more questions. I have one question in the back up there, and then we'll ask.
Okay, Melanie, I like your presentation. Thank you a lot, especially the approach and what you're working on. But I'm just wondering, in commercial life, what you see is that companies, they have a vision, an ambition, a plan, a budget, and well, it's all based on growing, of course. Mm-hmm. And the plans are really pushed to further grow the company. Well, on the one hand, it's a very economical story. On the other hand, it helps also to drive, growing the impact of the company and the contribution to the society. So there's a pro in it as well. If you take your approach and your entity-like structure, I can imagine that, especially if it is not for profit or if it is a bit more, say, lesser commercial, that it also drives lesser the ambition for growth. How do you see that, and how do you make sure that, well, in the end, your initiatives grow at least as fast as commercial initiatives? Because that's what you need if you want to be an alternative to the commercial world. So I look forward to your answer.
Thank you. So that's a beautiful retelling of the dominant narrative. And basically, Look, did I mention that Novo Nordisk is steward-owned, and Maersk, and Carlsberg, and Rolex, and there's a lot of really huge companies and corporations that are steward-owned. So I think anybody saying that steward-owned companies can't grow isn't probably very aware of the case studies, the fabulous, wonderful case studies that do exist in the steward ownership ecosystem. Even IKEA, I mean, they're foundation owned. I'm not saying they're like social or anything, but but the point is that foundation owned companies can dominate in ways that are helpful or less helpful. So I don't think that it is any kind of a hindrance for growth. But that being said, though, I think we also need to look at this hyper growth model. And you're saying that the growth of this company is really beneficial for everybody and for the ecosystems. And I also just gently want to question that logic as well. So, here's the thing. Venture capital, the way that it works is that it is funding basically startups like their lottery tickets. So they know that statistically speaking, 9 out of every 10 startups are going to fail. So that basically means that the 10th one that succeeds, not only can it be a moderate success or a nice lifestyle company, no, it needs to be a unicorn, right? Which is a company with a valuation of $1 billion or higher. Now, the only problem, though, with this hyper-growth strategy is that basically you are pumping these companies full with VC money, which, by the way, 65% of US VCs are actually funded by pension funds. So actually, indirectly, this is happening with our own pension money. And then we kind of start getting the WeWork effect that, somehow these companies are spending, they're losing money 5 times faster than they're getting it from customers, and we don't stop and ask, whose money are these cash-bleeding unicorns actually spending? And the problem here is that it's basically just a kind of pump and dump scheme, because when you grow that quickly, of course, people are super expensive, and when you hire that quickly, your customer revenue is never going to keep pace with the spend from the rate with which you're hiring. So then the point there is that, the math doesn't work. It just doesn't work out. It's like those 15-minute delivery companies. You kind of wonder, how do these companies actually exist with all these coupons that they're giving away for all this free stuff? Well, the math isn't supposed to work because they're pretending to be in 15-minute delivery, or they're pretending to be cybersecurity companies, or they're pretending, to be whatever kind of company that they are, but actually that product or service that they're delivering is not at the core of their business model. They're actually financial institutions. Their primary business model is selling equity. And that is called financialization. And the problem here is this deforms entire markets. Because, look, in Amsterdam here, there's been some really fantastic startups that were in the same cybersecurity space as my company, right? And then the problem is we're in the same market. And if you are bleeding money like cash, bleeding money like there's no tomorrow, then of course you can afford to pay better than me, And I have some pen testers, it's the same problem with banks. Banks, of course, can afford to pay great, and sometimes banks pay even more than what I charge my own customers per hour. You know, and then my pen testers come to me and say, yeah, I want to raise because like over at ABN Amro, you know, I can be earning, you know, 200 an hour when I'm, you know, charging my own customers, you know, 175 or something.
We'll ask Olaf that later on.
Yeah, the math doesn't work. And, you know, and no, but let me finish.
No, but we're getting into a situation now
No,
because we're in it.
But,
No, just
no,
kidding.
but look,
But we need to finish, Melanie.
I
I'm
know.
sorry.
But I basically tell them, look, you know, if I got permission from the Dutch government to lend out money I don't have at 10 times leverage, I could afford to pay you better too. You know, it's the same thing also with these VC-funded companies. They are deforming the market, and then actual companies with a business model like mine are forced to compete with these cash-bleeding zombies that wouldn't survive, you know, if they weren't getting these infusions. Let's take this word unicorn and substitute it with a phrase that I think describes the real situation better. It's pension fund subsidized monopoly forming.
Melanie Riebach, thank you very much for your wonderful, engaging presentation.
Yep.
I saw some other hands being raised, but I think these questions can be asked during the borrel. For now, thank you very much, Melanie. Olaf from ABN AMRO as a gift for you. We have some very interesting announcements still between now and the borrel, so stay in this room. I think the doors are also locked, so you have to stay. Daan Hogendijk, samen Digitaal Veilig, is also has helped to distribute this event. Via the QR code, you can look up to the website. You can look up the website of Samen Digitaal Veilig. Can you briefly explain what Samen Digitaal Veilig is? And maybe Reinder can go with the microphone to Daan. And what your thoughts on this conference were. You already shared it a little bit, and you can look it up via the QR code. So please get your phones, scan the QR code, and then Daan will briefly explain.
Well, Samen Digitaal Veilig was founded by the brancheorganisaties, so the associations.
Yes.
And because when there's a new law, or there's a very difficult situation, like research showed that small companies did not invest enough in cybersecurity. And it's very important because what we do every day is 99% digital. So we are actually trying to promote cybersecurity for small businesses via the brancheorganisaties.
Okay.
And we partner with hundreds of also commercial companies. Because we need them to deliver products and services to the smaller companies. And we also work together with ABN AMRO and with you. And so we're basically a platform for promotion of cybersecurity for smaller companies. And we help companies implement certain laws.
Such as NIS2.
Such as NIS2 in an easy fashion.
NIS2. Very good. So look it up if you want, if you need to help smaller companies. Samen Digitaal Veilig, really nice platform. Then in the feedback form you will see in I think 3 minutes. You will also see a question from the Adviesraad Digitale Weerbaarheid. And and there are some people in the room who are also from that Adviesraad. Melanie, who just had the keynote, and Dimitri. So Melanie, you know, and Dimitri is over there. And if you want to share some knowledge with this Adviesraad Digitale Weerbaarheid, who is representing the interest with regards to cybersecurity and digital autonomy of all the organizations and companies in the Metropolitan Region of Amsterdam, please go to Melanie and Dimitri to connect with them during the borrel. Then I want to ask Herbert to come forward because she wanted to announce something regarding AMSEC, right?
Not so much.
Not so much?
Close,
Oh, to close. Okay, but before we are going to close the conference, and I also see Martijn in the back, so I'll ask him to come forward. I want your feedback, and I have heard that until we have 50 answers, 50 respondents, the doors will stay closed. So please grab your phone, scan the QR code. I think it's literally one question which is mandatory and one voluntary question. So this is possible to get the 50 answers. And I think Viola will, Brigitte will raise the hands if the 50 answers are there, right? And open the doors. Geef ik deze even aan Herbert. Oh, I think most people are writing the feedback. Brigitte, how is it going with the responses? Is it good? Okay. Then I want to invite Herbert to the podium to close this session.
Thank you, Bernard. So we're reaching the close of the 15th AMSAC symposium. AMSAC has been doing extremely well in recent years, so we are organizing more workshop and symposiums than we've had in just a couple of years ago. It's been a tremendous success. So what we do is we have some smaller workshops that are highly technical in content, mostly aimed at researchers. They are extremely interesting for that particular audience. And then once a year, roughly, sometimes 2 times a year, we have events such as this one, which are on a more broad range of topics, not necessarily highly technical, but no less interesting or important. And I think this has been a very, for me at least, an extremely interesting session that we've had today. This was an eye-opener in many respects for me. I learned a bunch of things about steward ownership that I did not know. I knew a few things, but there's a lot of stuff that I did not know. I learned a lot about that we don't need to worry about the Armageddon, cyber Armageddon anytime soon. That's fantastic stuff. So I really enjoyed this session. I hope you enjoyed it also. I want to thank this bank and Martijn Dekker in particular and his team for hosting it here. So we've done this before. We are very happy with this location. It's a nice location. It's very easy to reach. We are happy that the bank is so much involved in this topic and with this region. So I'd like to thank ABN Amro and Martijn Dekker in particular for this. And then finally, and then I'll shut up. I want to say that, like I said, we have these smaller symposia for academics, and we are really, I think, well versed in organizing these things. We like this stuff. We do this almost on a daily basis. But these events, the one that we're having today, are slightly, different for us. Not necessarily something we do a lot. And I don't think we could have organized any of this, not even with the help of ABN AMRO, but especially without the help of Bernard. So Bernard Nieuwensteeg has been doing this for a couple of years now, and I cannot tell Bernard enough how much we've appreciated this. So this has been tremendously successful, and unfortunately this is not something that currently will be continued for reasons. I hope that we can continue it in some other form, but I really want to know, I want you to know that we've very much appreciated this, and it's been a success because of you. And as a token, a small token of appreciation, I want to also give you a present for all these years of investing your time and your efforts in making this a success.
Wow. Thank you very much, Herbert. Thank you. Well, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Well, this resembles perfectly with the last slide I have, because in 3 days, it's Valentine's Day, right? And I encourage you all to think back on the love you had with the digital world. Thank you very much, all the speakers. Thank you for the panelists. Thank you, partners that organized this conference. And see you next time. Thank you.